Thank you all for coming. I'd like to introduce Kevin Quinn. Probably many of you know him already. He's done a number of programs for us here in the library. First, the Appalachian Trail talk, and then he did one on Mount Everest. He also did one on the Camino de Santiago Trail, and now he's going to talk to us about the Ice Age Trail and tell us some exciting news about it. Kevin, would you like to get started?
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay. Are you able to show us your slideshow?
Let me see. I need to see how, I'm not having the option to take over here. Let me see. Okay, yes.
See Lisa on there.
Okay, can everyone hopefully can see the screen now? Laura,
Yes.
Is it appearing on your screen? I can't, I think Laura is still muted.
It would be nice if everyone would mute your microphone until the end of the program.
Okay, so Laura, you can see the screen?
Yeah, yes, it's working now.
Okay, great. So thanks for everyone for tuning in, and a thanks to the Sturgeon Bay Library and to Laura for giving me the opportunity to talk about the Ice Age Trail. So today I'm going to do a number of different things in the presentation. First, I'm going to give you some figures about the Ice Age National Scenic Trail and tell you how it got started and give you a sense of what the whole trail is about. And then I'm going to walk you through my own hike, which I did on the Ice Age Trail between 2018 and 2019 in pictures and tell you about it. And at the end, I'll follow up and give you some resources if folks are interested after I've done this presentation with getting more into exploring the trail themselves. So with that, let me get started. So as you can see, here's the Ice Age National Scenic Trail in Wisconsin. It's one of 11 National Scenic Trails. And it's actually one of only 3 of the National Scenic Trails that are totally within a single state. You can see that the other 2 are the Arizona Trail and the Florida Trail down here. Probably of the 11, the 2 that most people have heard of are the Appalachian Trail, which is over here, which starts in Georgia and then goes all the way up to Maine. And the Pacific Crest Trail, which starts on the Mexican border and goes all the way up to the Canadian border. Both of those trails have had lots of books written about them. Probably the ones that people are probably most likely to have heard about are Bill Bryson's book, A Walk in the Woods, that was turned into a movie about his hiking on the Appalachian Trail. And then Cheryl Straya's book, Wild, which was about her hike on the Pacific Crest Trail. And that was also turned into a recent movie as well. So this is a little bit closer view of the Ice Age Trail and its path through the state of Wisconsin. So you can see the eastern terminus begins here in Potawatomi Park, you know, just a handful of miles from downtown Sturgeon Bay.
Okay. I'm listening. It's my hour program. I want the Ice Age Trail. This one guy, it's live right now.
If folks could mute their microphones, please. It then heads up into this area called the bifurcation. That has an interesting story behind it. So there's two different paths you can take if you're attempting to do what's called a through hike, which is to walk the entire trail from one end to the other in one continuous effort. When they were designing the route of the trail, apparently they couldn't end up reaching consensus on where exactly it should go. And so at least at this point, you have two choices for how you do your through hike of the Ice Age Trail. So it splits here, right around Devil's Lake State Park, and then joins back up together again near the town of Coloma. And then you head pretty much due north up to around the town of Antigo in Langlade County. And then you head across the border, across western Wisconsin to the border with Minnesota in the town of St. Croix Falls, along the St. Croix Falls, the St. Croix River. So that's the Ice Age Trail in overview. So it's a big trail. It's about 1,200 miles that I've just shown you. And as a National Scenic Trail, the organization that has overall responsibility is the National Park Service. They work with the Wisconsin DNR, but the reality is that in terms of the day-to-day efforts to build the trail, to repair the trail, to improve the trail, they've given responsibility for that to this organization over here, the Ice Age Trail Alliance. That's a nonprofit, volunteer-driven organization. Last year, to give you a sense of the size of the effort to work on the trail, the Ice Age Trail Alliance last year had about 2,400 volunteers that contributed over 83,000 hours of volunteer time working on the trail. So, you know, when a tree falls down on the trail, it just doesn't magically get taken away. The volunteer group led by the Ice Age Trail Alliance has groups all along the trail that have the responsibility to go out there and take care of that and to build new trail and improve the trail. Some significant events in the history of the Ice Age Trail. I go back in thinking about this to this 1921 article by Benton McKay. Most people point to this article as the one that gave rise to the whole concept of building the Appalachian Trail. But I also think of this article as setting the scene for the whole concept of National Scenic Trails in general for America. This idea that there would be long distance trails all across the country. This really gave it the inspiration to start thinking about this. In 1958, this guy, Ray Zillmer, founded this group called the Ice Age Park and Trail Foundation with the whole idea of building something that was called the Ice Age Trail in Wisconsin. And that group became the present day Ice Age Trail Alliance that I just talked about. If you go forward to 1968, this is a really important year for the National Scenic Trail system in general. It was passed by an act of the US Congress to create the National Trail System, and the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail were named at this point as the first two National Scenic Trails. In 1980, the Ice Age Trail became the nation's fourth National Scenic Trail, and that was also via a bill sponsored by a congressman from Wisconsin, Henry Royce. And he actually wrote a book back then that was called On the Trail of the Ice Age. So he was really invested in creating the Ice Age Trail. So that makes 2020 a really important year for the Ice Age Trail. It's the 40th anniversary. Actually, this past October was the month in which the Ice Age Trail got named by Congress as a National Scenic Trail. And so there were a lot of celebrating events around this sponsored by the Ice Age Trail Alliance. And then the final thing, if people don't know about this, is that also in October of this year, Sturgeon Bay got named an official Ice Age Trail community by the Ice Age Trail Alliance, partially in recognition of its important position as a town on the eastern terminus of the trail. So it was a nice honor for Sturgeon Bay. Here's some facts and figures. I provide this so folks get a sense of what is involved in actually hiking the entire trail. If it's about 1,200 miles long, if you include both that eastern and western bifurcation that I was talking about. But if you choose to go, let's say, just by the eastern bifurcation, it's about 1,140 miles. Of those miles, 640 are what I call trail miles. So that's what people think about when they go for a walk. You know, you're walking on a trail, on the dirt, in the woods, or through a farmer's field, something like that. The other 500 miles are road walks, because this is an indication that the Ice Age Trail is still a youngster. It's a work in progress, and the trail isn't complete yet in terms of being a continuous trail walking through the woods. So these road miles represent how you get from one trail segment that's a traditional kind of trail to the next trail segment. And so you can see that there's a lot more work for the Ice Age Trail Alliance to do to turn this into a completely trail-driven trail like the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail is. The total vertical gain on the trail, what do I mean by that? So if you count up all the times you're walking uphill across those 1,140 miles, and you know, after that you might walk down and then you'll walk up again. But if you count all those feet, you end up having walked up about 51,000 feet across the entire Ice Age Trail. So Wisconsin is, we think of as a pretty flat state compared to, you know, California with the Sierra Nevadas, for example, or the eastern US with the Appalachians. But still, walking up 51,000 feet is something to think about. The next thing for through hiking in the through hiking community, people like to figure out and set records. And the most common record is the idea of who's walked the trail the fastest in one continuous effort. And actually this summer, this guy, Corey Waltering, who's actually an ultramarathoner, finished the trail here at the eastern terminus, having started at St. Croix Falls. And he did it in less than 22 days. So if you do the math on that, you figure you can find out that Corey was doing about 50 miles a day, every day for, you know, close to 22 consecutive days to complete the trail. So that's quite an accomplishment. When I completed the trail in 2019, I was told by the Ice Age Trail Alliance that I was the 206th person to have completed the trail. That's not a very high number, and I think it's an indication that in terms of through hiking, or as I did, you know, section hiking the entire trail, it's still a relatively infrequent, unusual phenomenon. Just to give you a sense of how this compares to, say, the Appalachian Trail, when I completed my through hike of the Appalachian Trail in 2017, I was told by the Appalachian Trail Conservancy that I was almost the 20,000th person to have hiked the trail. So that gives you a sense of how popular or crowded the Ice Age Trail might be for through hikers compared to the Appalachian Trail. It's a little different, but it's changing, especially this year with people getting outdoors because of the pandemic. I've really seen the number of people, you know, day hiking or section hiking out on the Ice Age Trail has really picked up. What I'd like to do now is tell you about some of the challenges I found when I did the hike. And part of this relates to the fact that I had every intention when I started out of doing this as a through hike. And for a variety of reasons that I'll go into, I ended up having to come back and finish it in 2019, even though I had started out hiking it in 2018. The first thing is insects. And I think, you know, all of us who live here in Wisconsin are familiar with what mosquitoes can be like in the summer. And I was aware of that, but when I hit the western and north central area of Wisconsin, I ran into some of the worst, well, I ran into the worst infestation of mosquitoes that I've ever seen in any of my hiking experiences. And a lot of this, I think, has to do with the fact that there are a lot of wetlands in western Wisconsin. But it got so bad that I got off the trail. I couldn't stand it anymore in terms of the mosquito infestation. The second thing is the weather. And again, as a relative newcomer to Wisconsin, I've only lived here for about 5 years now. I didn't think there would be a problem hiking in Wisconsin in the summer, but it gets pretty hot and it gets pretty humid. And that can be a real challenge if you're trying to do 15 or 20 miles a day, day after day. And, you know, severe weather can be a problem. And I had the misfortune of walking through central Wisconsin back in last year when, I don't know if people remember, a series of very severe tornadoes touched down in the Wausau area. I happened to be on the trail on the day that happened, and I'm glad to be here to tell you about it, but I wasn't real happy being on the trail when that was going on. And the trail was actually devastated. So again, I got off the trail after that because until the Ice Age Trail volunteers got out and cleared the trail again in the area I was in, I wasn't able to be doing any hiking in a safe way. The third challenge that I found was the road walk. So remember I told you that 500 miles of the trail was walking on a road. And at first glance, you might think, well, that's easy peasy, right? And, you know, it's a nice, hard, flat surface. And if it's a road, you're going to be not going up real steep mountains as you're walking. But it turns out that on the Ice Age Trail, these connecting sections can be really long. You can be on a road not infrequently for walks of like 20 miles. And I actually figured out what was the longest road walk on the Ice Age Trail. It's 75 miles of continuous road walking if you choose to use the western bifurcation. And of course, beyond the road being kind of hard on your knees and your feet if you're pounding along a really hard surface, there's relatively little tree cover. You're not going to find a lot of palatable areas to get water. And it's mostly private property. So if you're looking for a place that you are allowed to camp at night, you want to be in the woods. And so it meant that when you walk the Ice Age Trail, you have to plan very carefully for when you hit these road walk areas. So you're not there at 8 o'clock at night and wondering if you're going to be able to camp in someone's front yard and not, you know, escape attention. The fourth challenge are the hunting seasons in Wisconsin. And that definitely limits hiking on some sections of the Ice Age Trail. And as we all know, Wisconsin, it's not just the deer hunting season and the gun deer hunting season, which just ended. There are a lot of different deer hunting seasons in Wisconsin. And some sections of the trail are actually closed to hikers during this time. And this spreadsheet that I show here, you can't really read the details, but I put it up there. That's a list of all the trail sections that are closed during deer hunting season. And so if you're out there walking, you don't want to be on those trail sections. Other sections are open, but you have to evaluate the risk. And you know what I found out was, again, I knew about gun deer hunting season until I hiked the Ice Age Trail. I didn't know how important bear hunting was to Wisconsinites. And I happened to be out in western Wisconsin during the bear hunting season, which I can tell you begins in early September. And I can tell you this, I'm not kidding. I ran into more bear hunters and their dogs than I did backpackers during my entire time on the trail. Just during the bear hunting season, I ran into more bear hunters. So that's a popular activity. Final challenge. And again, these are all things that surprised me. It was the isolation on the trail. You know, I mentioned that I was the 206th versus the 20,000th person hiking the Appalachian Trail. I wasn't prepared for how lonely it is out there on the Ice Age Trail if you're backpacking it. running into anyone other than, bear hunters was a rarity for me on the trail. When I hiked the Appalachian Trail, when I got to a campsite at night, there were always half a dozen or a dozen or more hikers there, to share the campsite with. My entire time on the trail, I never had to share a campsite with another backpacker. So it definitely was a change. And what it meant was when on those rare occasions when you ran into another backpacker, it was really an exciting time. You wanted to stop and spend some time and chat them up and find out what they were doing because you didn't know when you're going to run into another hiker. And so just to underscore this, how isolated the Ice Age Trail is, this fugitive evaded the law for 3 years in Marathon County by digging out a bunker that ended up being close to the Ice Age Trail. He hid there for 3 years until he got arrested. And he got found because and I was there volunteering with the Ice Age Trail. We were rerouting the Ice Age Trail in Marathon County. And completely unknown to us, we rerouted it very close to his bunker. And then a hiker hiking the new version of the Ice Age Trail ran across this guy, alerted the police, and the rest is history. So that's how isolated the Ice Age Trail can be. So the other question that I want to raise is, why is it called the Ice Age Trail? The other two trails that are National Scenic Trails that are totally contained within one state are given the boring names of the Florida Trail or the Arizona Trail. So why isn't it the Ice Age Trail? Why isn't it called the Wisconsin Trail? So the reason is because it's in recognition of the impact that the last ice age had on Wisconsin and on the North American continent more generally. So this is an artist's representation of that last ice age, which began roughly 30,000 years ago. And you can see overlaid as a representation of where the Great Lakes would be after the ice age, this glacier retreated. So this ice age began, as I said, about 30,000 years ago. This glacier called the Laurentide ice sheet came down into Wisconsin, and you can see different lobes of this glacier stretching across the state. And I think the major message is that in terms of the landscape we're used to seeing in Wisconsin, it's really shaped Wisconsin's landscape as a result of glacier action. And there have been multiple ice ages that have carved up Wisconsin. And so when you walk through the Wisconsin landscape, a lot of what you're seeing is a consequence of various ice ages, and this last one in particular. Up to 2/3 of Wisconsin were covered by ice and covered by glaciers during the various ice ages. The only area that wasn't, and that's why it's called the driftless area, you can see down in the map over here. For whatever bizarre reason, geologically, this never got hit by a glacier. And so that the landscape there is distinctly different than what you see in the rest of Wisconsin. So if you put the map up of the Ice Age Trail, and then you draw a line over here, tracing what's called the terminal moraine of the glacier, and that refers to the last part where the glacier stopped, the most forward advance of the glacier is called a terminal moraine field. You can see that we call it the Ice Age Trail because the intent is for you to walk the terminal moraine of the last great ice age to hit Wisconsin. So that's why it's not called the Wisconsin Trail. And so the thing that makes the Ice Age Trail unique compared to the other National Scenic Trails is that a walk through along the Ice Age Trail, in addition to being a really wonderful way to learn about the state and the towns and the people, it's a history in geology, and it's a history it's a history lesson in glaciology. And it really helps if you're walking the Ice Age Trail to have an appreciation of glacier terminology. And that's why I thought I'd take a couple minutes and give you, Glacier Vocabulary 101 lesson, if you will. So these are some of the features that you'll see, and rather just, walking through them, to understand what you're walking on makes it a really cool experience. So the first glacier feature is called a cane. And you can see one here. It's just this hill here that's wooded now. But that's a conical hill that is formed as a result of debris piling up underneath the glacier. So just imagine this 20,000 years ago. There's a glacier maybe 100 feet high above this point, and debris has piled up underneath it. The glacier retreats, and you're left with a hill. People might be familiar with Holy Hill in Washington County. There's a Catholic church on top of it, kind of a monastery, if you will. That hill is a cane. It wouldn't be there if not for the result of glacier action. Another glacier feature is called a drumlin. And you can see a drumlin are these elongated hills that you can see on this picture going across the landscape. Imagine a giant's fingers going out and burrowing through the landscape and creating these furrows in these hills. The drumlins are the result of glacier action as they move in the direction of those hills back and forth as they advance and retreat. If you want to see a drumlin, if you get out on the Anape Trail, which is also the Ice Age Trail between Maplewood and Neenah Avenue, and if you use your imagination, because they're largely eroded at this point, you can see some drumlins actually pretty close to here. To see a better example of drumlins, I'd recommend going to Waupaca County and hiking on the Skunk and Foster segment of the Ice Age Trail. That's probably the best example. The drumlin is a relatively rare feature of the Ice Age Trail because typically drumlins are formed upstream from the terminal moraine in sort of the main body of where the glacier is working the landscape. Eskers are a very common feature that you'll find on the Ice Age Trail formed by glacier action. Again, eskers are formed by debris that pile up underneath a glacier as a result of streams bringing debris down between the ground and the bottom of the glacier surface. And you can see here in this picture, sort of these rounded hills. These are eskers. And again, as I said, with a cane, imagine 100 feet in the air being glacier ice, 20,000 years ago. It melts and goes away, and it leaves behind this debris field that you see here. Kettle Moraine State Park, in the southeast part of the state, has tons and tons of eskers, and it's probably the feature that makes the Kettle Moraine State Park one of the more challenging sections of the Ice Age Trail to hike. Erratics are another feature. And so this is an erratic here, this large boulder. So in Ice Age, during the Ice Age, as the glacier advanced, it picks up these large chunks of rock. And then when the Ice Age begins to end and the glacier starts melting away, the rock is dropped and left there. So especially in the terminal moraine field where you see a lot of what the glacier first started to drop, you're going to see lots of examples of erratics. And that's my favorite one. In Marathon County, the locals have decorated it, but you see these all over the place. And they're so large that you can see here, the farmer has chosen to plant his cornfield around the erratic rather than thinking about trying to remove it. Last glacier feature that I'll tell you about are kettles. And kettles are formed when, again, the glacier begins to retreat and maybe a large chunk of ice from the glacier calves off and is left behind. it settles into a depression, and when it melts out, if the right conditions exist so that that pond or small lake becomes self-sustaining, you end up with a pond that's left behind. And you know, a lot of western and north central Wisconsin has a lot of wetlands that come courtesy of this kettle formation as a result of glacier action. Oh, before I forget, Lake Geneva, very large lake, southeast Wisconsin, great example of kettle lake. Not only ice age trail, but still the result of glacier action. So now what I'd like to do is walk you through my walk on the Ice Age Trail. And I like to think of the Ice Age Trail as being divided into 3 segments. There's an eastern chunk of the trail, which goes from, you know, around here in Sturgeon Bay down to near the town of Janesville. And then a central section that takes you up near Antigo. And then a western section that takes you all the way across to the town of St. Croix Falls. So let's start out with talking about the eastern segment. So what are some of the characteristics of the eastern segment that make it different, maybe a little bit, than the central or western segment? So first, it's the initial miles that you walk are mostly flat, and the trail is kind of follows the Anape Trail for a good distance. In fact, if you start walking on the trail, you know, out Neenah Avenue, you know, sort of on the outskirts of the city, past the industrial park, you're going to be on the Anape Trail all the way down basically to the town of Algoma. So that's a good distance. And the Anape Trail is great for walking because, as you can see here in this picture, it's nice and flat. It's crushed gravel, not much elevation change. So it's good, easy walking. There's also a fair amount of road walking on the eastern segment. For example, to get from Algoma down to Kewanee, it's going to be one continuous big road walk. Then when you hit the southern part of the eastern segment, you will go through the North and South Kettle Moraine State Forest. And that's probably the most challenging section of the eastern segment. All those eskers that you see that I told you about, a lot of them are in the Kettle Moraine. It makes it a lot more challenging to do your hiking, a lot more up and down. And the track is not nearly as nice and smooth and rock-free as you see on the Anape Trail. So I think many of you have been to the tower parking area in Potawatomi Park, and you've seen the terminal sign. The beginning of the trail is here. It makes Sturgeon Bay a very special place as an eastern terminus for the Ice Age Trail. Takes you right through Pot Park, right on this nice path here. You see this yellow signpost, this yellow blaze on this post here. That's a sign that's ubiquitous to the Ice Age Trail. The Ice Age Trail is blazed with these yellow stripes on trees or poles. And it basically tells you that you haven't gotten lost. Yes, you're still on the trail. It's your way of knowing that you're following the Ice Age Trail if you don't have a map or a GPS device. Anape Trail, a little bit further south. Again, you know, very easy, nice walking. This is one of the unique features of the Ice Age Trail. For a couple of miles north of the city of Two Rivers, the trail takes you right out onto the shore of Lake Michigan. And, you know, this is pretty cool. I mean, you're walking right along the lake, and it's actually become a lot more challenging hike in recent years because with the rising lake levels in Lake Michigan, it's gotten harder and harder to walk along the shore, and it's become, you know, a lot more challenging where you have to jump up on the dune to make sure you're not getting your feet wet. When you hit the Manitowoc area, the Ice Age Trail takes you right through the city. So it becomes much more of an urban walking experience, which happens a few times on the trail. So, you know, why would I show you a picture of the Black Dog Bistro? So this is on a road walk section of the Ice Age Trail. Rhine Center, Wisconsin, which you can see is where this is located, is literally nothing more than the intersection of two roads. But remember what I told you about road walking being a challenge? The saving grace of road walking on the Ice Age Trail in Wisconsin is that if you're persistent enough and persevere, you're going to hit a small family bar that you can walk into and get something to drink, and if you're lucky, maybe a burger. And that makes the road walking bearable. And the thing about the Ice Age Trail in Wisconsin is that, in case you didn't know, Wisconsin ranks 3rd among all states in bars per capita. So that means that if you persist enough on your road walk, the Ice Age Trail is eventually will bring you to a small town or just country bar where you can get refreshed. Really important to remember. Here's another picture of a esker in the Kettle Moraine State Park. And you can see what I mean about it being, the trail being a lot rougher here. And you can see it's steep and uphill, and it's not like walking along the Anape Trail at all. So I include this picture just to emphasize that the Ice Age Trail is road walking and walking in the woods and walking along the side of Lake Michigan, but a lot of Wisconsin is farmland. And in order to get the trail off the road and into the countryside, the Ice Age Trail Alliance has negotiated easements with a number of farmers. And as long as you behave yourself, the farmers allow you to walk through their fields. And you can see this is completely kosher. There's an Ice Age Trail marker here telling you as you're walking through this soybean field that you are on the Ice Age Trail. And all the Ice Age Trail Alliance asks you to do is, to respect the fact that this is private property and, to just move through the area and don't try to camp there or to, damage the area in any way. The Ice Age Trail takes you to Hoey Hill. I mentioned the Hoey Hill is actually a cane. It's over 1,300 feet high. And that makes it one of the largest cames in the entire eastern Wisconsin area. Lapham Peak in the Kettle Moraine State Park is another example of a cane. It's 1,200 feet high, and they put an observation tower on top of it as well. Ice Age Trail takes you literally right next to the observation tower. I include this picture of a shelter in the Kettle Moraine State Park to illustrate a difference between the Appalachian Trail and the Ice Age Trail. On the Appalachian Trail, literally every 10 to 15 miles, you run across a camping area that's going to have something like this, a lean-to, 3-sided shelter with a roof. On the Ice Age Trail, this is really rare. The vast majority of the time when you end up camping, you're going to be doing what's called primitive or backcountry camping, where you just find a place in the woods and hopefully a flat spot to pitch your tent. At most, you'll find an area that has been intentionally cleared into a place that you could pitch a tent or two by the Ice Age Trail Alliance. But as I show here, when you're in Kettle Moraine State Park, there are a number of places that have these shelters set up. And so that's a nice break from doing the primitive camping that I was just describing. The other thing that the Ice Age Trail Alliance does to make the trail passable are building these boardwalks. And again, I've volunteered with the Alliance on a number of occasions to help build these. It's very labor intensive, and it's also costly, to get these materials. And there are a lot of boardwalks that have been built by the Alliance throughout the Ice Age Trail from the eastern to the western terminus. And it makes a huge difference in terms of how easily you can navigate some of these sections, especially when the trail gets really rough or, really wet. So that's it for the eastern segment. Let's talk about the central segment now. And so some of the characteristics of the central segment that are more distinct. So the trail takes you through Janesville, right through the middle of Janesville. The largest city you're going to hit on the Ice Age Trail, it has over 65,000 people. So again, as with Manitowoc, it's an urban hiking experience. You don't go through Madison, but in the central section, you go past the western suburbs of Madison, often on one of these rail to trail networks like the Anopi Trail. Only in this Madison area, it turns out there's a huge number of these. It's, you know, it's very popular to go biking, I guess, in the Madison area, and they have a great trail system to support it. The challenge for being on the Ice Age Trail is kind of reading the roadmap, so you know when you're supposed to be on one of these and then when you're supposed to transition to walking on one of the others. They're not always perfectly marked, and so you can easily get yourself lost. And of course, I'm telling you this because one time west of Madison, I did get off the trail because I was following the wrong bicycle trail for a while. Again, it takes you through the bifurcation, you know, when you hit Devil's Lake State Park until you hit Coloma, you have to decide whether you're going to take the eastern or the western segment. I took the eastern bifurcation in part because it allowed me to walk through the actual boyhood home of John Muir. He's a very famous environmentalist, founded the Sierra Club, and is really responsible for the creation of Yosemite National Park in California. So, native to Wisconsin, I wanted to go by his boyhood home. And as I mentioned before, the section that takes you through Devil's Lake State Park is one of the toughest sections of the entire trail because it's probably the steepest elevation gain and loss that you'll see on the entire trail. So here we are in Janesville. You can see the trail here takes you right along the side of the Rock River. This is the town of Evansville. And you know, again, one of the saving graces for the road walks is that it will take you into a small town. And if you're backpacking the trail, you need to periodically get off the trail to get to a grocery store, for example, to resupply. And so having proximity to small towns is really important. And as I point out here, even more important perhaps to backpackers is that in a small town, you might go by an ice cream shop, which you're going to want to stop at. I include this because this is an example of this maze of rail to trail bicycle and hiking trails that you run into in the central segment. So here you have the intersection of Badger State Trail and the Sugar River State Trail. And the trail, the Ice Age Trail actually transitions from one to the other at a couple of these places. You have to really be on your game to make sure that you don't go off in the wrong direction. The trail here on one of these rail to trail sections takes you through the Stewart Tunnel up here. A really interesting part of the trail. It's the hiking section is called the Monticello Segment if you're interested. And it's about 1,000-foot long tunnel, so dark and so long that you really need your headlamp on when you're walking through it. The sad thing is that this year the Alliance has had to close this section of the trail and you have to detour around it because there are some structural problems with the tunnel. I guess some rocks in the ceiling, it's all rock and brick lined, have started to fall down. So I'm not sure when this section is going to be opened back up. I mentioned John Muir. The trail takes you through his boyhood home. So his family moved to Wisconsin from Scotland when he was 11 years old. And he lived there for quite a while before, you know, he eventually moved out west. This is the top of Gibraltar Rock. It's another one of the high points, so to speak, on the trail. It's a couple 100 feet climb to get to the top. And then the other reason why I have this picture was because this is one of these exciting days where I ran into another backpacker. And I probably walked with this guy and chatted with him for at least half a day until we parted ways. It was just so nice to have another hiking companion to pass some of the time. Another distinct feature of the Ice Age Trail, when you reach this section of the trail near the town of Merrimack, you need to cross the Wisconsin River. The Ice Age Trail doesn't tell you to swim across, fortunately. You get on the car ferry and get driven across. And so I think of this as the rough equivalent of the hiking the Appalachian Trail. When you hit Maine, you have to cross the Kennebec River. And again, that's not one that you can cross by wading or swimming across. And the Appalachian Trail Conservancy there actually pays a guy in a canoe for the entire summer to ferry hikers across the river. So here on the Ice Age Trail, at least you don't need to go across in a canoe. You can walk across on the car ferry. I went through Devil's Lake State Park on a kind of overcast day, so the pictures that I have of it are not very as dramatic as they should be, but they give you some of the most challenging elevation changes that you need to do. Basically, you need to walk up and down both sides of the Devil's Lake moraine area. And one section, actually, it's the hike up to Balanced Rock. For those of you who have been to Devil's Lake and maybe done that hike, that's the steepest section on the entire Ice Age Trail. You gain 500 feet in elevation in about 3/10 of a mile. And that, you know, that's extremely steep. And that's as steep as you're going to see on the entire trail. And frankly, it's probably as steep as you're going to see on the Appalachian Trail. Although the reality with the Appalachian Trail is that you have a lot more steep sections like that than you do on the Ice Age Trail. This is a fascinating area. This is near the town of Baraboo and the Baraboo River as it heads up towards dumping into the Wisconsin River. And this is part of the road walk section. So it's not just the interesting parts are on the trail. This is called the Lower Narrows. And you walk through an area called the Baraboo Hills. They're 400 to 800 feet high. But the geologists tell us that the Baraboo Hills were formed 1.5 billion years ago. These are some of the oldest rock in the entire North American continent. It's part of the Precambrian era, which is the oldest geologic period in Earth's history. At one point, geologists estimate that these hills were more the height of the Alps or the Rockies. But 1.5 billion years is a long time, and they've been eroded down to the point now that they're just 400 or 800 feet high. Just to give you a sense, you know, the Appalachian Mountains are considered old mountains. They're about 500 million years old. So 1/3 the age of the Baraboo Hills. And the Rocky Mountains are youngsters. They're 50 to 80 million years old. I think every National Scenic Trail celebrates the point where you've gotten halfway on the trail. And the Ice Age Trail is no different. This happens near the town of Coloma. As you can see, this sign is telling you that you're about halfway. Another example of a shelter, this is a really nice one because it enables you to close the doors and the windows and keep the critters out. For example, bears or porcupines, and to a certain degree, mosquitoes as well. When I walked across this section, the water level was so high that this boardwalk that the Alliance put in, the water was actually seeping up between the boards. This year, they've had to close this section of the trail because the water is now over the top of the boards. So it's not just Lake Michigan level water levels that have risen. Water levels are at historic highs, you know, throughout the state. Thirsty Perch is another example of Kevin showing you bars that he stayed at, spent time in when he was on the trail. My favorite name for a bar. I actually based myself in Iola for a couple of days and section hiked while I was based out of the town. And yes, I ate dinner here a couple of times. One of the other challenges, Ice Age Trail takes you through a lot of forestry cropland. And sooner or later, no matter when you go, you're going to hit a section of the trail that is being actively harvested. And that presents a number of challenges. One, you run the risk of then having chopped down a tree that had the yellow blaze on it. So it's more of a challenge to make sure you know that you're still on the Ice Age trail. And then secondly, the result of all the tree chopping, you're going to end up with erosion problems. And if it rains, which it does a lot, the track is going to become really muddy. And you can see here that walking through this area, if it's recently rained, is going to be a real sloppy mess. And then finally, as I was approaching the town of Antigo at the end of the central segment, I saw this sign. And you might wonder, as I did, why are squirrel tails wanted? And so when I got back home, I did the research and found out that they make fishing lures from them. So again, this is part of the Ice Age Trail, I guess, as an educational experience. You learn all sorts of fascinating things that you normally wouldn't, I think. Okay, last segment. Taking you from Antigo out to St. Croix Falls, the western segment. This is probably the most remote area of the Ice Age Trail. The terrain in general is consistently more rugged than the other two sections. Huge amount of wetlands you're going to go through, as I mentioned. And so the mosquito problem is going to be huge. The towns where you can go to resupply are going to be smaller and less frequent and further from the trail. So again, it becomes more of a logistical challenge. And so overall, this was the section of the trail that I had the most problems with, or the most challenge to get through. In particular, this Mondo Esker segment, this is a picture of the trail, and I'll challenge you to tell me where the trail actually is. It was really, really tough to get through this area. And I tell people that if I didn't have a handheld GPS device with the trail marked on the device, you might still find me out there wandering around, not having gotten through it yet. If you're willing to take a side trip when you get near the town of Rib Lake, you can walk about a 10-mile round trip and hit Timms Hill, which is the high point. If you're into high pointing states, that's the high point for Wisconsin. So we're getting into, I'm going to be showing you a few pictures of wetlands, so just get used to it. So streams are common, a lot of beaver activity in western Wisconsin. Here's a beaver pond, a beaver lodge. The trail often takes you over top of a beaver dam or just behind a beaver dam pretty consistently. Sometimes the trail one year is here, as it is in this case. Then a couple of enterprising beavers come along and decide that's where they're going to put a new dam. And then the next year, the Ice Age Trail Alliance finds they have to reroute the trail because that can no longer function as part of the trail. So that's another reason why the trail is a dynamic entity. From one year to the next, it's never exactly the same. Yep, I just want to mention to you, if I haven't previously, that western Wisconsin has wetlands. And fortunately, the Ice Age Trail Alliance has done a terrific job of building boardwalks so that it's possible to navigate these areas a little more easily. So I include this picture just to prove to you that western Wisconsin is not all terrible, wet, swampy wetlands. There are actually sections that you hit that look like a real trail in the woods. And this was a lovely section. It's an area called the Hardwood Lakes area. A very pretty area. The only bad thing is that these sections never last as long as you would want them to. Favorite name for a swamp? I went through a number of swamps on the Ice Age Trail. Bogus Swamp, great name in Langlade County. So one of the things that I do a lot, if you look at my Facebook page, is I love weird signs when I'm out hiking. And so this is just an example of one that I found. I couldn't help myself. A lot of rivers on the Ice Age Trail. Most of the time, the vast majority of the time, there's a bridge courtesy of a road or the Ice Age Trail Alliance building a bridge. The best example of otherwise you can usually rock hop across the stream. But when you hit the Prairie River in Langlade County, I had to take my shoes and socks off, roll up my pants, and wade across the river. This was probably the only place where I had to do that. And you can see my pack here in the bottom of the picture as I'm getting ready to wade across. This is near Grandfather Falls along the Wisconsin River. Fortunately, the Ice Age Trail takes you across a bridge. This is the steepest waterfalls on the entire Wisconsin River. And the trail takes you right down along the side of the river in this section. It's pretty cool. This was weird. You know, you're out in the middle of nowhere in western Wisconsin doing part of a road walk, and you come to an intersection like this. And this is not the only one. But it says you're at the intersection of 17 and 3rd Street, 17 and 3/4 Street, and 28th Avenue. And you think, why didn't they just give this street intersection real names? You know, these are gravel roads usually. So when I got home, I researched this. So this particular sign is in Barron County. And Barron County is really interesting. It's a perfect square. It's 30 miles on a square. And in Barron County, the east-west roads are called avenues. The northwest roads are streets. And the names of those are based on coming from the southwest corner of the county. So when you get to here and it says 17 and 3/4 Street and 28th Avenue, that tells you that you are 17 and 3/4 miles from the western border of the state and 2 miles from the northern border of the county, from the county, Barron County. So you know exactly where you are in Barron County when you hit these road markers, and they're all over the place. I talked a lot about what a nice job the Alliance did building bridges. This is probably the sketchiest bridge that I went across. It's just a bunch of packing crates that they've lashed together. And as far as I can tell, the main reason why they did this is that Game Lake is an interesting lake. It's called a bog walk. They have these floating bogs on the lake that just kind of meander around the lake. And so as far as I can tell, to preserve the environment of Game Lake, they've kind of put together their own floating bridge to get you across. And, you know, it looks pretty sketchy when you see it, but, you know, I was able to get across successfully, as all the other hikers do as well. Last picture of a shelter, best shelter on the entire trail. I spent a lovely afternoon lunch break here. It was so new that I could still smell the fresh cut pine from the shelter structure. Yeah, the unfortunate thing is there are just not very many of these shelters on the trail. There are too many lakes in Wisconsin to name them all, I guess. And again, this would be an unpleasant place to pass through in the middle of July because of all the water and all the mosquitoes. Finally, you're near the end of the trail here. The town of Centuria brings you back onto, you know, an Anope trail-like bicycle trail that's called the Gandy Dancer Trail. Used to be a rail line. And then you hit the western terminus of the Ice Age Trail with a plaque just like you see in Potawatomi Park, except it says western instead of eastern. And then you're here at St. Croix Falls. So the last thing I want to do, if I can take a minute, is just point you towards some resources. And then if it's possible, Laura, I'd be happy to take some questions if there's time and interest. And so the resources I provide are useful if you want to do day hiking, or if you want to be out for a few days, or if you're trying to do this thing where you want to walk the whole trail in one continuous effort. Basically, go to the Ice Age Trail Alliance webpage, the iceagetrail.org. It's kind of a one-stop shop for lots of different resources. There's also a Facebook group that you can join. It's called 1,000 Miler Wannabes. Really great group of people. I can almost guarantee you, if you join the group and ask a question, like, well, what's this section like? Or, how's it looking in this area? In less than an hour, I always had answers back when I had raised a question on this group. There's also information on the Ice Age Trail website for people that are called trail angels. So if you need help, shuttling your car, if you want to be out for a day and need someone to pick you up or drive you to the start and then you walk back to your car, trail angels are people who live near the section of the trail you're interested in walking and are willing to do this. More of a challenge in the age of COVID, where the Alliance has encouraged people not to serve as trail angels, at least until this whole pandemic thing settles down. But you also find on the website spreadsheets that tell you where campsites are, where post offices are, where towns are, and importantly, when hunting seasons are and what sections are closed. These are resources that you can purchase. I used all of these for my hike. Probably the guidebook was the one that I found most useful. And just to give you an example, for this terribly difficult section that I was talking about, the Mondo-Eskers segment, this is the page in the guidebook. And the really useful piece is this thing here, where it tells you, it shows you this triangle in the boot. And it's on a scale of 1 to 5. And that's telling you, for the triangle, how much elevation gain, how much walking up hills are you going to do? And the boot's telling you how difficult the track is in terms of being able to walk. And so not surprisingly, the Mondo-Esker gets a 5 for difficulty of walking and a 3 because it has a moderate amount of elevation gain. Just to level set you, if you were on the Anape Trail, between Neenah Avenue and Maplewood, that gets a 1 and a 1 because it's really flat and it's really easy walking. So that just gives you an idea of what that's like. So if you're interested in hiking, or even just helping to be a volunteer for the Alliance and help build trail or repair trail, I'd encourage you to consider joining the Ice Age Trail Alliance. And on their website, there's a membership page that you can go to if you're interested. So at this point, Laura, if people are still interested, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions they might have. And again, thanks everyone for tuning in. I love talking about hikes, and I hope I've convinced you that the Ice Age Trail is really an interesting trail to explore more thoroughly.
Great, thank you. There was one question that someone posted in the chat section. How did you find camping sites on extended road segments?
So basically, when I was on an extended road segment, I either planned to stay in a hotel, say in the town of Anago, which is in the middle of a big road segment. I stayed at a hotel there. Or I planned my walk in such a way that I wouldn't hit the need to stop for the night during a road segment. And that makes planning long distance backpacking, the Ice Age Trail, a lot more difficult. You never have to think about that on the Appalachian Trail. You just walk until you want to stop, or you know that in a few miles you're going to hit one of these campground areas. The thing that people sometimes do that I urge you not to do, which is to do what's called stealth camping. And that's where you find a place that you're not supposed to be and pitch your tent. The sad reality is that some people do that, but you're potentially impacting other people, because if you tick off private landowners because you're a place where they don't want you to be, you're going to ruin it for everyone else, because they might remove the easement that they've granted to the Ice Age Trail to allow people, to walk through their property, for example.
So you have to follow proper protocol.
Yes, indeed. And the Ice Age Trail Alliance has signs posted when you're going through areas that are not, backcountry, state or national forest, where you are allowed to basically camp anywhere you want. They'll identify a section that says you're now going through a private easement area, please stay on the trail, do not get off, do not camp, do not set fires. And it's really important to respect that, because people have taken back their easements. And then it's forced the Alliance to step back and add road miles instead of subtracting road miles from the trail, because they've lost a trail segment because the landowner has found a hiker has violated the agreement.
Okay, well, if anyone has a question, you'll have to unmute yourself and then go ahead and ask a question. How many people are in the Sturgeon Bay group that maintain this area?
There are very few. So for example, I'm one of the people I identify as a trail angel. When we moved here about 5 years ago, I became the contact person for the Ice Age Trail Alliance living in Sturgeon Bay. There's now a handful of other people that I know are active in the community, but it's still a relatively modest number of people who have joined the Alliance. The section of Sturgeon Bay is part of the Lakeshore chapter, which in terms of the number of miles is the largest of the local chapters for the entire Alliance. About 188 miles of the 1,200 miles is part of the Lakeshore chapter. And so there are a lot of people in the Lakeshore chapter, but we cover a long distance. There are people down in Kewaunee and Manitowoc, et cetera, that are part of the Alliance. And, we divide the responsibility up for monitoring and maintaining the trail depending on where you live. We can always use more chapter members, both to help volunteer and to just get out there and enjoy the trail.
Do you have regular meetings where you figure out what you're going to work on, or how does that?
Yes, there is a chapter chair. We actually have a meeting coming up in January that they're usually in person. Our chapter chair lives near Two Rivers, actually. And last year we had a planning meeting in January. We met in person at her house, figured out what we were doing. This year it's going to have to be virtual. And then every April, there's a meeting of the entire Alliance across the entire state. The Alliance headquarters is in Cross Plains, and it's often held there or in other central locations near the trail. This year, again, unfortunately, the plan is, because of COVID, is to hold the meeting virtually. But usually there are in-person meetings, and our chapter chair does a great job of maintaining an email list, and we work virtually, planning activities. And there are usually always in-person, work crew days as well. That's been more of a challenge again because of the pandemic, and we're just, chomping at the bit to get back to more normal activity.
Okay, well, no one else seems to be asking a question. So I guess we could wrap this up unless you have something else you want to add. That's really interesting. I haven't actually walked on any of the trail, even in Sturgeon Bay yet, but I'd like to get out there and try it.
Yeah, so I guess the last thing I'd add is that the Sturgeon Bay segment is probably maybe a total of 16 miles if you add up everything from the tower in Pot Park out to Maplewood along Highway 42. That's where that section officially ends. If you walk the Sturgeon Bay segment, you basically get to experience every different aspect of what the Ice Age Trail is like. There's trail that takes you along the lake in Pot Park. There's some elevation gain as you're going through the park, get up to the tower. You walk through the West Side Business District in Sturgeon Bay, so a more of a city urban walk. You do a road walk out to Nina Avenue, and then you get to hit the Anape Trail. So if you're interested in the trail, to do just that entire Sturgeon Bay segment really gives you a really good flavor of what the different kinds of walking that you'll do when you're on the Ice Age Trail.
Interesting. Well, thank you very much, Kevin.
Hey, Laura, thanks for hosting this. As you know, I love talking about this stuff, so I really appreciate the opportunity.